Hey, everybody. Welcome to our regular get-together on the first and third Thursday of the month. I'm Leslyn Keith. I'm the Director of Research and President of the Board for the Lipedema Project. And on these Facebook Lives, I like to do research updates with you, things that pertain to lipedema, studies of lipedema, various papers about lipedema, or other topics that I think will be of interest to you. So thank you so much for joining me today. I am going to do a little bit of different type of paper today. Typically, I mean, there's just so much research out there right now with lipedema that I'm really focused on those papers that are talking about that. But because it's the beginning of the year and it's very common for people to make New Year's resolutions, that I thought I'd do this rather large study that was done in Sweden specifically about New Year's resolutions. I think you'll find it interesting. There's a couple of outcomes related to this study that I think you will find very, very interesting. So you can see the title of the paper is A Large-Scale Experiment on New Year's Resolutions. Approach-oriented goals are more successful than avoidance-oriented goals. So this is what I want to talk about. It was done in Sweden. It was published in PLOS ONE. It's a peer-reviewed journal, and it was published in December 2020. This is the most recent study I was able to find about New Year's resolutions. So what did the researchers want to find out? They wanted to find out what kind of resolutions people tend to make. How confident are they that they can stick to their goals or keep implementing what they promised that they would do for the year. So in other words, they wanted to see how successful people were. And they also wanted to look at this thing called approach-oriented goals versus avoidance-oriented goals. And I'll describe what that means. They wanted to see if a different way of writing the goal would that have an impact on how successful they were? And they also wanted to know the impact that support will have for making them be successful with their goals. So first, those definitions. So approach-oriented goals. These are goals that you expect to receive some kind of positive feedback from others when you complete it. For instance, the goal could be, I will increase my maximum bench press to 280 pounds. Okay, that's a lot, but it's a positive thing that you wanted to achieve. Or I will be more talkative in social situations. It's phrased basically in the positive. And then the other is avoidance oriented. You write the goal. It's a goal in which you want to avoid looking foolish. You want to avoid failure. You don't want others to perceive you as incompetent. And they're more written in the negative. So these could be, I will not eat snacks before going to bed. I will stop being so shy at parties. You can see, especially with those last ones on each of those examples, to put it in the positive, I will be more talkative in social situations versus the avoidance, I will stop being so shy. By phrasing our goals in this way, although they might have the same outcome in our behavior, does that have an impact on how successful we'll be? And so that's one of the things they were looking at. So what were their methods? How did they go about this? So they recruited participants from the general public, and they randomized them into 3 groups. One group had what they called no support. Second group 2, was some support, and group 3 was extended support. And the study lasted for 1 year. So just to describe those groups. So group 1, what they called no support, this group was given a brief orientation, a brief information about New Year's resolutions, and they were told to list what they wanted to do, what their resolutions would be, and then estimate what they thought their chance of success for achieving that New Year's resolution. And then they completed 3 self-report surveys, which I'll describe to you in a second. And then they had what they called 3 follow-ups over the year. So they had this first one, and then 3 more times. The third one was when the study finished. So in December, the study started in January, and finished in December. So group 2, some support. So they were given the same information as group 1 about New Year's resolutions and asked to, they were, in addition to what group 1 had, they were asked to name a person who was going to be their support for the year. So they had to name that person. And then they had to, they listed their resolutions and what they thought their chance of success was. They did the same 3 self-report surveys, but this group had 12 follow-up visits over the year, so 1 each month. And they were also periodically sent an email with information and exercises about how to cope with possible challenges and barriers for reaching their goals. So this group was called some support. And now group 3, what they were calling extended support, same information as group 2 with the information and the email and stuff like that. And they named their goals, they named their support person, but they were also given information about what we call SMART goals. And so it's an acronym for specific, measurable, forgot what the A is, realistic and time-bound. Got to remember what that A is. But this is a way of writing a goal that can be very specific about what you want to achieve. And they were also given information about goals that were more approaching rather than avoiding. So something that are more positive rather than negative. And then they were also named, they were supposed to name a support person. Then they were estimating how confident they were. They thought they could meet their goals. And they also had 12 follow-ups over the year. And in addition to that email about barriers and challenges to changing your behavior and reaching your goals, they also had 3 additional emails, and those were about, the first one was about motivation, the second one was about thought patterns, and the third one was about negative spirals in relation to New Year's resolutions. So, and they were encouraged also, and additionally, they were said, let's make some interim goals so that you have, progress goals that you're making throughout the year on the way to your ultimate New Year's resolution. And so from what I could find from reading the article, I did not see that their extended support meant meeting with a professional or getting any kind of that like coaching type help. And really, I wasn't able to determine really what the follow-up visits for group 2 and group 3 entailed. Was there an in-person contact? Did they even meet virtually? Were the follow-ups just an email with information and then fill out your 3 surveys? I really don't know what the follow-ups constituted, but it was a very large sample size. So they had 1,066 participants in the study, very nice size. And they were recruited from the general public in Sweden, and they used social media outlets like Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit. And they used major news outlets, and they also used what they called university television. So something that was on university campuses. And the only requirements that there were to participate is you had to be at least 18 years old, and you had to be fluent in Swedish. So let's look at the demographics of this 1,066 person group. And so they were overwhelmingly female, so 81%. I thought that was interesting because that would more pertain to our lipedema population. They were overwhelmingly married or had some kind of partner. That was 73%. They had children, 73%. They were employed, 75%. And they had a higher level of education. Only 14% stopped at high school. So 79% went beyond high school, could have been just a few university classes, all the way up to a doctorate. So this is a very specific group that's female, married, with children, employed, and highly educated. So it's a very somewhat skewed demographic. But once they were then put into the 3 groups, they made sure that they were relatively even as far as what their age. Average age is 44. So this was it was then computerized for the randomization. So it was very nicely randomized so that each of the three groups had their demographics were very, very similar. So what were their measurements in those self-report surveys? So at each follow-up, they were asked to rate how successful they felt like they were at their sticking to their resolution. This was on a scale of, it was a 10-point scale. And so it went 0% all the way up to 100%. And they were also asked to ask how much they believed they would be successful in attaining their resolution and sticking with it. And also on a scale of 1 to 10, or 0 to 10, 0, no conviction, and 10, complete conviction that they were going to be doing this. So the self-report surveys, one they had, it was a quality of life scale. It looked like it was a Swedish one. And so they were measuring quality of life. And then the next one was, interestingly, it was called the pure procrastination scale. So measuring their level of procrastination. And there was a Swedish version they used for this. And they also had a Swedish version for self-efficacy. This was the general self-efficacy scale, how much power they felt like they had over things, and how much how effective they felt like they were able to handle their life. And so they had those three self-report scales that they did on each follow-up. Remember, with group 1, no support, there was only 3 follow-ups, whereas group 2 and group 3 had 12 follow-ups throughout the year. So what were the results? This is when it gets interesting. So what are the most popular resolutions that people want to do? In this group of 1,066 people, what were the most popular things that they chose that they wanted to improve or change over the next year? And so 75% were concerned with improving their physical health. They had some kind of resolution that was related to physical health. 33% said something about losing weight. 20% said something about eating. And then 13% said self-improvement, various things that had to do with that. All the remaining participants, all the remaining goals were 5% or less for various things. They were mental health, smoking, finances, drinking, alcohol, things like that. So those were much fewer in number. So those are the main ones that they had. I think kind of what we would expect. So what were the success rates between the various groups? So a majority of the participants rated their success in meeting their goals at 70%, or 7 out of that 10-point scale. And the description for saying that you were a 7 was, I am by and large sticking to my New Year's resolutions. So they felt like for the most part, this is, yes, going well. And they considered that a success. If they rated themselves 7 or higher on that 10-point scale, this was a success. But interestingly, over time, when you look at a graph of what's happening over the period of months, it was diminishing. So it was not, they had fewer and fewer success. But by the end, by the last month in December, it was still 55%. So they were 55% successful meeting their goals by the end of the year. So that was over a majority of participants were successful. But how did the level of support help? So this one was very interesting. And this one, I want to show you a slide of a graph that they did. And so you see this at the far left, that's when the study started. And then as we go through the months, this is going through January through December, and you have a 1 point at each month. So the little squares, each of those points, the squares is group 2. The circle, you can see that they just had 2 more visits after the initial visit. That is group 1. And then the filled in circle, where they have 12 points on their scale, that's group 3. So remember, group 1 is no support. They were considering that the control group. And group 2 is some support. Group 3 is extended support. Isn't it interesting that group 2, as we would expect, with some support did better than the no support group. But group 3, extended support, did not even do as well as the no support group. And the authors have some information about that, about why they think that happened. But I thought that was very interesting outcome of this study. So let's go back to looking at some of the other results. So let's look at the six. I'm going to go to this page here. Yes. Okay. So now the title of the study was talking about approach-oriented versus avoidance-oriented goals. So how did that go? Remember, only group 3 had information about that, but everybody's resolution was looked at by the researchers to see if they phrased it as an approach-oriented or an avoidance-oriented goal. And it turned out that a majority of participants, regardless of what group they were in, 64.5% made resolutions that were stated as an approach-oriented goal, so a more of a positive. And the majority of participants who stated a goal as this approach orientation, so majority, 59%, were successful at sticking to their goal. So if they did an approach-oriented goal, they were more likely to stick to their goal. And this contrasted with 47% of participants that if they had an avoidance-oriented goal, they were less likely to meet that, or they were not successful. So that was interesting. And as it said in the title, that you are more likely to have success when you do those approach-oriented goals. So that is something to think about when you're making your own New Year's resolution. But let's look at those self-report surveys, because remember, it was looking at procrastination, quality of life, and self-efficacy. So all the participants, regardless of their group, they all made improvements in procrastination and in quality of life and in self-efficacy. But the ones that let's see, all participants, regardless whether they were successful in sticking to their resolutions, they actually still had less procrastination by the end of the year. Pretty cool. And the data from the self-efficacy and the quality of life self-report surveys, they all had improvements there, but participants who were successful in meeting their goals or sticking with their resolutions, they had greater self-efficacy and greater improvements in quality of life. So the other group that weren't successful also had improvements, but not as much as the ones who were successful with their goals. And that kind of makes sense. So what are some conclusions that the researchers came up with? They said that the participants receiving some support reported greater success than those receiving extended support. And those that use the approach-oriented rather than the avoidance-oriented also increase the chance of successfully sticking to their New Year's resolutions. So here's what they suggested might be why some support did better than extended support. And they said that the additional support asked them to write these very specific goals. And sometimes when you're very specific, you have a better understanding and objective knowledge that maybe you didn't meet that goal. If your goal is very vague to, I want to improve my physical health, then you could feel like, yeah, I'm doing good with that. But if I want to improve my physical health by exercising twice a week, it's very obvious whether or not you're doing that. And so they felt like that maybe they had less success because they were encouraged to be specific. And they also they were encouraged to make these interim goals, these progress goals. And so then it was very, specific. This date, I haven't met my progress goal for this date. And so more chance for failure when you have that. So there's definite benefits to having these very specific goals and knowing what you're going after, but sometimes they can also make it more difficult for you and challenging for you. Let's see. So that's their conclusions they came up with. Then they said a couple of limitations in the study. Every study, no matter how well run, it has some limitations. And so this study, they said that adhering, quantifying whether or not that they adhered to their resolution or they're successful at achieving their goals was very subjective and determined by the participant themselves. And the researchers suggested that if they had some kind of outsider, a family member or something like that, who would report on whether or not they were adhering or meeting their goals, that might be more objective on how it's going. And they also said that there was a lot of similarities between the support that groups 2 and group 3 got. And because of that overlap, it was harder for them to figure out what made it more difficult for group 3. So those are some limitations. I think there's a couple of others that I want to point out to you. And the first one was that I think, as I already said, this was a very specific sample, overwhelmingly female, married, with children, highly educated, employed. So it was kind of a skewed group to that particular population. So it's hard to generalize this out to the rest of the world unless you meet those characteristics, that this may not really apply to you. And then the next one was that I really felt like they needed more information on what constituted those follow-up visits, because a big way we can have a difference between group 2 and group 3, some support and extended support, is to have live, not necessarily in person, it could be virtual as we're doing right now, that kind of support, either between the participants in that group or with an expert. I think that could have made a big difference on how a group that was labeled extended support could have done. So that would be an interesting thing for the next time this is looked at. So I hope that was interesting to you to look at this study, kind of very timely, because a lot of people are thinking about making changes at the beginning of the year. And so hopefully that will be helpful to you. I'm just going to look at a couple of comments really quick before I go to some exciting announcements that I want to give you. Thank you for those of you that have posted to let me know you're here and you're listening. I always like to know when you're here. Aileen from Puerto Rico, and Sherry is here listening, and 2 other people that doesn't say your name. I see you have posted that you're here listening. So nice to have you with me. So let me give you just a couple of announcements. First, this is very important because this thing is happening today in just a few hours. This is our town hall meeting. It's happening today at 6 p.m. Eastern. And this is going to be a really exciting event because we're going to be talking about what we have accomplished in the last year in the lipedema community and what Lipedema Simplified has been doing over the last year. Let me tell you, it's a lot. So, and each of us that are participating and sharing some things that have been accomplished, we're going to do our best to talk really fast because there is so much to pack in this short time that we have for the webinar. But then we also want to talk, what are the exciting things we have planned for 2024? And there is a number of wonderful, wonderful things that we have coming up for this year. So be sure to register. We give you the link below. Register even if you can't be there for this event at 6 p.m. Eastern. Register because you will be able to get the replay. And by replaying, you will be seeing all those wonderful things that are happening in the field of lipedema and what we have planned for the next year. So another exciting thing that's coming up, just the beginning of February, we have 4 clinicians, a workshop by Dr. Perrin. He's an osteopath from England, and he is going to be presenting about his Perrin technique, which can be used for a variety of conditions, including chronic fatigue, long COVID, and things of that nature. But we think it also may have a huge impact on those with lymphatic disorders, specifically those with central lymphatic dysfunction. And so we are inviting clinicians to attend this workshop to get certified in the Perrin technique and then be able to offer this to their patients. Going to be a huge value, a wonderful, wonderful workshop. Is going to be held in Boston in the first weekend of February. You have a link down there to find out more information and to register. We only have a few spots left because there's only so many people that Dr. Perrin can train at one time. To find out more about the Perrin technique and how it may benefit your patients, come to this free webinar. And that is going to be on, it's going to be on January 24th, I believe. It is, right now, there is not a link to register for it, but I just want you to save that date. It's going to be on January 24th. Dr. Perrin is going to be presenting for us and talking more about the Perrin technique and how it affects the lymphatic system. So please look out for new information coming about that and join us for that webinar. I think those are all of my announcements that I have for today. Switching back again to see what people have been posting. Thank you so much for being involved and posting. So we have some people from Alabama and Massachusetts, and of course, Aileen from Puerto Rico. Lots of participation today. Thank you so much for being here. I really look forward to what I have to do to prepare for these, because I really can dig deep into a paper and find out the exciting information to then transfer to you. If you have a paper you would like me to look at and present to the community and give my take on, please email me, leslyn@lipedemaproject.org. Let me know about that. If you have any comments or questions about the papers that I have presented, feel free to email me. If you're not able to get the paper yourself, which I do believe the one I did today is freely available, but if you have difficulty getting the paper, email me and I will send it to you. Once again, wonderful being with you here today, and I look forward to being here again with you next month. But for right now, see you later.